we shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the honourable member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Journalist Mark Riley from Channel 7 has reported that of the 43 tourist visas the government granted and then cancelled to those from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone since October 7, 20 have been reinstated on appeal. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this is accurate?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I'm asked about Mark Riley's reports, and Mark Riley's reports are always worth watching on Channel 7, Mr Speaker. And Mark Riley has also reported on Channel 7 that Hamas didn't take over the occupied Palestinian territories and the Gaza Strip since October 7, that they were actually there beforehand, when those opposite were granting 1,000 visitor visas from people from the occupied Palestinian territories. I can certainly confirm that of the visitor visas that have been granted since October 7, the only cancellations have been offshore.
Give a call to the honourable member for Reid.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cost of living relief? Why is this so important, and what approaches has the government ruled out?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question, and it was great to be with the member again in her electorate over the weekend at Ferragosto, and we had a wonderful day together, and the member was very well received, I've got to say, in her electorate. We know that Australians are under pressure, which is why from day one we're focused on cost of living relief. And on July the 1st we delivered not just for the electorate of Reid but for every single taxpayer received a tax cut, all 13.6 million of them, energy bill relief for every single household, an extra 2 weeks government-funded paid parental leave, a freeze on the cost of PBS medicines, and we backed in a pay rise for 2.6 million award wage workers. And last week we added to that with a 15% pay rise for our early educators who work in our childcare centres right around the country. But once again we did it in a way that will keep costs down for working families by making sure that there's a guarantee there. Again, delivering, making a difference to cost of living whilst putting that downward pressure on inflation, and of course the 2 budget surpluses delivered by the Treasurer has really helped with that as well. And this week we're working through the Education Minister on the legislation that will cut $3 billion from student debt, as well as we've got legislation to put super on paid parental leave. This is our priority as a government. For those opposite, of course, it's clearly not their priority. More concerned with the Middle East than Middle Australia. Not concerned with cost of living relief at all, or the economy, indeed, at all. Indeed, the only thing that they have to offer on cost of living are ways to make the problem worse. A wages scheme to drive down pay, a supermarket scheme to push up grocery prices, and a nuclear obsession to drive up power bills. Obsessed with division, what we're focused on is delivery. They want to play cheap politics. We're delivering cheaper childcare. He wants to drag this whole debate into the gutter. We're focused on lifting wages and lifting Australia up. He wants to drive Australians apart. We're bringing people together. That's our focus, delivering on cost of living while making a difference to working Australia and middle Australia.
Give the call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Of the almost 3,000 visas approved for people from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone, how many were approved by an automated process and did not involve a referral to Asia?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question, which goes to automated processes. I'm reminded of who's obsessed by automated processes when they took the humans out of human services, with catastrophic consequences for Australians. And that's why they're not concerned about the impact that they had in government on robo-debt, on real Australians, real concern that they have. We'll continue to be focused on the needs of Australians. We'll continue to be focused on the issues that are of concern to them. We have, I've answered many questions about these issues. They're obsessed by it. What we're focused on is the same issues that Australians are interested in.
Give the call to the honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Why are decent earnings an important part of the Albanese Labor government's efforts to help ease cost of living pressures, and how does this approach differ to what has failed in the past?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the member for Aston for the way that she represents her local community and understands that cost of living pressures are the main game right now. And, Mr Speaker, when we came to office, inflation was higher than it is now and it was rising. Wages were stagnant, and that meant that real wages were going backwards really quite substantially. And the tax cuts were skewed to people who were already on the highest incomes. There were deficits as far as the eye can see, and there was $1 trillion of Liberal debt in a budget weighed down by waste and rorts. Now, we've turned two of those deficits into Labor surpluses, Mr Speaker. We created almost 1 million jobs. Inflation has come off substantially. Wages growth has almost doubled, and annual real wages are growing again on our watch, Mr Speaker. But we know that people are still under pressure, and that's why cost of living pressures are our primary focus. And that's the big difference between our focus on cost of living on this side of the House and them ignoring cost of living pressures on that side of the House. We're rolling out meaningful and substantial and responsible cost of living help. Tax cut for every taxpayer, energy bill relief for every household, cheaper medicines, cheaper early childhood education, help with rent. And we're also making a meaningful difference when it comes to people taking home more pay, earning more and keeping more of what they earn. Now, on our watch, Mr Speaker, the average full-time worker is now earning around $104,000. That's an increase of $8,273 a year, or $159 a week since we were elected, Mr Speaker. That same worker is now getting a tax cut of $43.72 a week, or $2,274 this year. Now, if the same worker had seen the same wages growth we saw from those opposite and the old Stage 3 tax cuts that they have legislated, they'd be taking home $3,235 less a year than they are under us. That's $62 a week they're earning more under us, Mr Speaker. Now, those opposite, they want lower pay. They want less help with the cost of living. They want higher inflation. They want higher interest rates. They have absolutely no costed or credible economic policies, and they won't tell us where $315 billion in cuts are coming from and what those cuts will mean for Medicare and for pensions and for the economy more broadly, Mr Speaker. Now, we are focused on the main game on this side of the House, which is the cost of living. We're fighting inflation, we're delivering surplus budgets, we're rolling out cost of living help, and very importantly, Mr Speaker, we are ensuring that more Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn.
Order. Before I call the member for Goldstein, the member for Riverina was constantly interjecting during that answer. He's going to cease interjecting for the remainder of this question and question time, or he'll be warned. Give the call to the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. To the Prime Minister. This week a mum in my electorate emailed me. I'm the daughter of a gambler, she said. I grew up walking on eggshells. 1 minute home was full of love and joy, the next uncertainty and despair. Her father gambled away the family's life savings and then took his own life. Now, with a 12-year-old son, she says of gambling ads on TV, "It terrifies me." Prime Minister, how would you justify only a partial gambling ad ban to this mother who fears for her child?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Goldstein for her question and for sharing the very personal story of one of her constituents. That personal story indicates the fact that this is not something which is new. If someone with a 12-year-old daughter is speaking about her life experience when she was a child, then one would assume that that is decades ago. And indeed, that goes towards the fact that gambling has been an issue in our society, I suspect, since man and woman walked and had a bet on who could ride the horse the fastest or who could run from rock to rock, literally probably before there were buildings.
Order.
So this has been around for a long period of time.
Order.
And in the last 2 years,
Barker will cease interjecting.
in the last 2 years, we have done more to tackle gambling harm than the entire period before then, for when this woman was a young child watching her father waste away the assets in that family. More in 2 years. We have delivered the most significant online wagering harm reduction initiatives of the last decade, including mandatory customer ID verification, banning the use of credit cards for online wagering, forcing online wagering companies to send their customers monthly activity statements.
It's going to be very difficult for the member to take a point of order on relevance when the Prime Minister is delivering his answer regarding the argument in the question regarding what he is doing on this topic. So it's going to be difficult for the member to take a point of order on relevance when I've explained to the House what the Prime Minister is doing with this question. But out of respect for the member for Goldstein, she has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. It is on relevance. The question went to the reasoning behind a partial ad ban, and I'm sure this mother would appreciate a direct answer. Thank you.
Prime Minister is being directly relevant.
And being relevant, not based upon hypotheticals, based upon what we have actually done. What we have actually done, most of which I assume is supported by the member for Goldstein and supported by most members of this chamber. We have said that the status quo regarding the saturation of gambling advertising is untenable, and that those are issues that we are working through. But we have done all of this. We've launched BetStop, which has meant that 27,000 Australians have now registered as of the 31st of July. That is 27,000 Australian families who will benefit directly. Now, today, not some decades ago, which I acknowledge has been an issue. People used to gamble at the SP bookies around the corner from where I grew up. Gambling has changed in its nature, but it is still around. The new minimum classifications we've done for video games have made a difference. The different taglines that are very different from the ones that we inherited that just said gamble responsibly. Like, what does that mean? Now that clearly indicate if you gamble you will lose, and points towards the opportunity cost of spending money on gambling rather than on other things.
Before I call the member for Lingiara, I'd just like to do some acknowledgements in the chamber today. I inform the House that present in the gallery today are representatives from the South East Queensland Council of Mayors, led by Chair of the Council and Lord Mayor of Brisbane, Councillor Adrian Schrinner. I inform the House that present also in the gallery today is a delegation from the Ahmadiyyan Muslim community as guests of the Minister for Communications. We have a number of ministers and members from parliaments from around Australia, and I inform the House that present in the gallery today is a delegation from Thailand, led by Ms. Shaipiar Sintupuri, and they are here today as part of the participation in the Canberra Fellowship Program. And I also would like to recognise former Senator for New South Wales, Mr Michael Forshaw, and members of the BAPS Temples Association of the Hindu faith, led by P. Bladresh Swami and other Swamis, accompanied by leaders of the BAPS community in Australia. Welcome to you all. I give the call to the honourable member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government ensuring Australians have access to life-changing medicines on the PBS after a decade of cuts and neglect? Why is it important to make medicines cheaper?
The call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the terrific member for Lingiari for that question. She knows Australia has one of the best medicine systems in the world, underpinned, of course, by the PBS, another great Labor legacy that was opposed tooth and nail at the time by the Liberal Party. And in just 2 years, we've made more than 200 new or expanded listings on the PBS. This month, we listed the first ever immunotherapy cancer jab, Tecentriq, which treats lung and liver cancer. Different immunotherapies, as I think we all know, Mr Speaker, are offering cancer patients new hope and longer lives. But those patients spend literally hours and hours in hospitals receiving their treatment through intravenous drips. Now, for the first time, Tecentriq will be available for more than 4,000 patients through a very simple injection delivered at home or in a GP clinic, saving more than 60,000 hours of hospital time every single year. And without PBS listing, Mr Speaker, this convenient, life-saving injection would cost $120,000 a year, but now it will be available at affordable PBS prices. And of course, Mr Speaker, we've been making those PBS prices even cheaper. In our first 3 months, we slashed the maximum amount that millions of pensioners pay for their medicines every year by 25 years. In our first 12 months, we delivered the biggest cut to the price of medicines in 75 years. And in our first 18 months, we finally allowed doctors to prescribe certain common medicines for 60 days' supply rather than just 30. Cheaper medicines, Mr Speaker, have made a real difference to millions and millions of Australians. But we know household budgets are still under very real pressure, and we know we need to do more, Mr Speaker, which is why we've also decided to freeze the price of PBS medicines for up to 5 years, which will save Australians another $500 million in their pockets. But we also know, Mr Speaker, that this progress, making medicines so much cheaper, is under real and direct threat from those opposite. The Shadow Treasurer last week, of course, confirmed that he doesn't support any of our investment in cheaper medicines.
Order.
Part of his $315 billion of secret cuts that are coming our way. And let's face it, Liberal governments have form in this area. The Howard government, of course, in their final term, jacked up the price of medicine scripts by $5 for general patients, and the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Health Minister, tried to repeat the trick by jacking up scripts again by $5, Mr Speaker. Well, on this side of the chamber, we'll keep doing whatever we can to responsibly help Australians with the cost of living, including by more bulk billing and cheaper medicines.
The call to the honourable member for Wide Bay.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, of the reported 43 tourist visas your government granted and then cancelled to those from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone since October 7, 20 have been reinstated on appeal. Did ministerial intervention occur to support any of these 20 cases?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you. The member is asking me a question about ministerial intervention. There certainly has not been prime ministerial intervention.
Give the call. Order. The member for order. No, members on my left will cease interjecting immediately. The member for Deakin. The member for Deakin will cease interjecting. The member for Wide Bay will cease interjecting. When the House comes to order. We'll hear from the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to support university students and give more people from the outer suburbs and regional Australia the chance to go to university?
The call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the absolutely sensational member for Bendigo, for her question. Mr Speaker, we're wiping $3 billion of student debt for more than 3 million Australians, including almost 17,000 Australians in the member for Bendigo's electorate. That'll help with the cost of degrees. We're also, for the first time, introducing paid prac to provide financial support for teaching students, nursing students, midwifery students and social work students. That'll help with the cost of living while they're at uni. But we've also got to do something about the cost of young people from poor families, from the outer suburbs, from our regions and from the bush, from missing out on the chance to go to university at all. About 1 in 2 young people in their 20s or 30s today has a university degree. But not everywhere, not where I grew up, not in our outer suburbs, certainly not in the regions and not in the bush. And one way to help with that are those regional university study hubs, places that bring university closer to where people live, so they don't need to leave home to go to university or travel for hours to get the skills and the qualifications that they need. When we were elected 2 years ago, there were 34 of these hubs across the country. We're doubling that. Already we've announced 10 more in the Pilbara, East Arnhem Land, King Island off the coast of Tassie, Innisfail, Warwick, Chinchilla, Longreach, Victor Harbour, Gippsland and Katanning. And I'm pleased to advise the House that the King Island, Pilbara and Gippsland hubs have now opened and are starting to support students. Mr Speaker, these hubs work. The fact is that where they are, we see enrolments at university go up and we see completions of university degrees go up. And not just that. People get jobs where they live and they build a life in the community where they grew up. And today we've announced that applications are now open for another 10 regional university study hubs. And so I encourage all members who represent regional Australia, who represent the bush, to work with your local councils, work with universities and put a form in, put an application in. Applications close. And I ask members of the Liberal Party to pay close attention here. Applications close on the 18th of October 2024. To be more specific, 5 p.m. And it'll be daylight saving by then. So that's Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So remember to put your clocks forward, not back. So you've got a 58-day warning. I hope that's enough time for the Liberal Party and Mr Speaker. I'm happy to table all of those details for the benefit of the New South Wales Liberal Party. It's all part of building a better and a fairer education system.
The member for Moncrieff has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, why have we fast-tracked visas for nearly 3,000 people from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone since October 7, yet our allies, like the UK, have taken in 168 and the United States only 17? Many comparable countries require face-to-face interviews in third countries or biometric tests to apply for a visa, conditions that Albanese government has waived. Was this decision based on security advice or political expediency?
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure will cease interjecting before the Prime Minister has begun. Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting immediately. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. All visitor visa applications, and this goes to a previous question as well, are decided with the involvement of departmental staff. None are fully automated. We have dealt with this process, as people would be aware, and I'm sure the member is aware. The Rafah border crossing is closed. Those opposite said nothing about these issues when the visas were actually being introduced now.
Order.
They're not being.
For Petrie.
They're not being delivered because people can't get out of the Rafa crossing, and those know that. But you know that's not the real point of this question, is it? It's not to get an answer. It's not actually to get information. It's to sow doubt and to stoke division.
Order.
And
Members
to
on my
create
left.
fear.
Member for Dawson.
And everyone knows
The Assistant Treasurer will cease interjecting. Order. The Minister for Industry and Science. It's highly disorderly to interject before I take a point of order. Member for Wannon on point of order.
It goes to relevance. The question was very straightforward. Was this decision based on security advice or political expediency? Very simple.
Order. Members on my right, the same principles will apply as it was to the member for Wannon, the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And the last two words that were just quoted show exactly why this answer is in order, because he's referring to the political expediency that is dealing with question after question for processes that were the same as have been used in Australia for years.
Order. Order. No, the member for Wannon is entitled to raise a point of order. This question was different, as it didn't specifically ask a fact or a figure, which we've been dealing with during the week. It was a very different question, with a question regarding political expediency at the end. So if you're going to ask a question about that topic, obviously the Prime Minister is able to, or a minister is able to respond regarding that issue. The Prime Minister has the call.
I'm certainly speaking about the political expediency of those opposite.
Right.
Political expediency that isn't concerned about cost of living pressures, that's not concerned about jobs, that's not concerned about wages, that's not concerned about our economy, that's not concerned about social policy, that's not concerned about our environment or tackling climate change or any of the issues that Australians are talking about in their households, that is more concerned about the Middle East than Middle Australia. It exposes their political expediency because they don't have an agenda. They're yet to come up with a single-costed policy. And I think that people will be having a look at this bloke, who ever since he walked in to the parliament as a new member has always looked to divide, has always looked to bring Australians apart, not to bring Australians together. Even when he's left this parliament, as he did during the apology, it was all about divisions, and then he apologised for it. He said that Lebanese migration was a mistake under the Fraser government, and then he said he apologised for it. It's just he apologised to Annabel Crabb, not to anyone in the Lebanese community. He hasn't yet apologised to Africans in Melbourne, who he said people couldn't get out. He continually looks to pretend that he's so strong, but nastiness is not strength. Nastiness is not strength. And punching down on vulnerable people is not strength. But that is what this bloke does. It shows Australia who he really is every day.
The member Moncrieff was on her feet. Just remind all members regarding reflecting on members during the course of answers and questions. Give the call to the honourable member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cost of living relief for highly feminised sectors, including for early childhood education, educators and teachers?
Call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and the Minister for Youth.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Canberra for her question. At least on this side, we care to ask questions about early childhood education and care and feminised industries, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, Labor came to this government in 2022 with a commitment to drive action to close the gender pay gap. And since then, we've seen the gender pay gap drop to all-time lows. Last week, ABS data showed that the national gender pay gap has fallen to 11.5%. That's down from 14.1% in May 2022. And that's not by accident, Mr Speaker. It didn't fall out of a coconut tree, so to speak. We are closing the gender pay gap by taking deliberate and carefully considered action.
Order.
The action taken by this Albanese Labor government is working across the economy to lift women's pay. Now, in low-paid, highly feminised sectors like early childhood education, where women make up over 90% of the workforce, we've supported 3 wage increases since we came into government. And earlier this month, I'm proud to say that we announced an historic 15% increase for early childhood education and care workers, Mr Speaker. What this increase means is that by the end of this year, 200,000 early childhood education and care workers will get a pay rise of at least $100 a week. And by the end of next year, that'll be at least $150 a week. Because, Mr Speaker, this government believes in giving these critical early childhood education workers, who are highly skilled and highly qualified, the fair and decent wages that they deserve. Now, this $3.6 billion investment towards a wage increase will make a real difference. It will make a real difference towards gender equality, and it will help to ease cost of living pressures, something that we have been focused on this side of the House. Now, Georgie Dent, the CEO of the Parenthood, put it this way. She said that this is momentous for gender equity, as it directly addresses the chronic undervaluing of a highly feminised workforce and bolsters a critical enabler of women's workforce participation. Mr Speaker, this wage increase is good for children, it's good for families, it's good for the economy, and importantly, it's good for women, most of whom are still primary caregivers, because it allows them to make that choice of what works best for them when it comes time to returning to work, to taking on further hours or to returning to study. And it's part of this government's plan for a universal early childhood education and care system, Mr Speaker, a system that works for the economy, that works for children, that works for families and that works for women.
The call, General Member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister concede that in cutting corners on security assessments to bring in 1,300 people from the terrorist-controlled Gaza war zone on tourist visas, he has made Australia less safe? Will the Prime Minister admit that this visa for vote scheme was only done to shore up votes in the seats of Watson, McMahon and Blaxland? Doesn't this go to his true character?
Yeah. It was obviously a part of order. Because there was far too much noise, which is highly disorderly. I didn't hear. There was a part of the question I want to clarify. The Leader of the House.
Prohibition on questions containing imputations against members and containing imputations on motivation.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask that part of the question to be withdrawn or rephrased.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister.
No, just withdraw that part.
Oh, you don't want me to change the question? Oh,
Just,
you want me to? Okay.
Just the
no, that's
inference.
fine.
Yeah, just the inference.
I withdraw that component of it.
Yeah. Order. The member for Cooper is warned. I'm dealing with the point of order that the Leader of the House has raised. It's highly disorderly. I thank the member for one, and the Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks. I'm asked a question about character from those opposite, and I'm happy to answer it by beginning.
Order, the Leader of the Opposition.
By beginning, he promised to smile more, but there's just more abuse.
Order.
Let me begin by quoting a character, Robert Menzies. This is what he had to say. It is a good thing that Australia should have earned a reputation for a sensitive understanding of the problems of people in other lands, that we should not come to be regarded as people who are detached from the miseries of the world. I know that we will not come to be so regarded, for I believe that there are no people anywhere with warmer hearts and more generous impulses. That was the founder of the Liberal Party. He wouldn't recognise this mob today.
Order.
Would not recognise
the Minister for Industry and Science will cease interjecting.
Because there was a time when the Liberal Party would have seen that people, where they were fleeing Ukraine, Israel, Syria, Vietnam, Gaza at the moment, would have had some understanding that this was the worst time to try to just malign a whole group of people who are suffering enormously, something that we see on our TV screens every night. You know, this morning you turn on the radio, the latest hit was a school in Gaza with real people devastated and losing their life. We have, when it comes to security processes, we have faith in our intelligence agencies. They work. Our security and law enforcement agencies do their job on an ongoing basis. We have faith in them. The opposition apparently don't, even though they're the same security agencies and indeed the same personnel. We talk about character. When it comes to targeting groups, whether it's Lebanese, people in the South Pacific, Chinese, the entire continent of Africa, they're all fair game. If you're an au pair from Europe and someone can pick up the phone, no problem, you're in.
Order. The Assistant Treasurer is warned. Trying to hear from the member for Hasluck and these continual interjections, the member for Hasluck will just pause and resume her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Highly objectionable imputation made by the Prime Minister, and he should withdraw it.
The statement, but I was listening closely at the end, the final part of that question, a person wasn't named directly regarding that. So if no, just to assist the manager, just so we're clear, if someone had said a person's name, I'm not going to identify anyone here, if they'd said this order, just so we're clear, if this person had done this or if this person had done this, they would have been made to withdraw. We're just going to remind all members, language is important.
Mr. Speaker, what's also important is that there are consistent standards applied to both.
The Leader of the House on the point of order.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Just on a point of order to be of assistance to the Manager of Opposition Business, the point of order that was earlier taken that requested the withdrawal was based on Standing Order 100, which applies only to rules for questions.
Just remind all members with their questions and answers to respect and reflect the standing orders. Member for Hasluck has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veteran Affairs. What will the Albanese Labor government's reforms to veterans' entitlements mean for Australian veterans?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Hasluck for her question and her tremendous advocacy on behalf of the veterans in her community as a veteran herself. The Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide found in its interim report that the veterans' entitlement system is so complicated that it adversely affects the mental health of some veterans. That's because there are three different complex pieces of legislation that provide the support system for our veteran community, and some veterans can be covered by all three pieces of those legislation. The first recommendation of the interim report of the Royal Commission was that the government get on with harmonising and simplifying this legislation that supports our veterans. And over the last 2 years, we have been consulting with the veterans community, families and experts, holding roundtables, webinars around the country to make sure that we could undertake this very important task. And we put forward a proposal that featured establishing an improved Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act as a sole, single, ongoing scheme, closing out the old Veterans Entitlements Act and the Safety, Rehabilitation and Compensation Defence-Related Claims Act to any new claims, and grandparenting all existing arrangements to ensure that there's no reduction in entitlements for those currently or that have previously received benefits as veterans. Last month, I introduced the Veterans Entitlement, Treatment and Support Simplification and Harmonisation Bill, the VETS Bill, to bring forth this new regime to support our veteran community under a single act. This will see an additional $222 million worth of benefits flow to veterans and families in just the first 2 years of operation of this new model. Critically, this will make it easier for veterans and families to understand what they're entitled to. It will make it easier for advocates to work supporting the veteran community and making claims, and it will make it quicker for the Department of Veterans Affairs to process those claims so veterans and families get what they need and are entitled to in a timely way. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for all of us across this parliament to improve the circumstances and the supports for our veterans. I want to thank all of the veterans, the families, the experts that have come together as part of the consultation, that have given their frank and fearless advice so that we can get this right. And I really appreciate the work that they have done to get us to this point, and I encourage everyone to come together to support this legislation so that we can provide a better future for our veterans and families.
Give the call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
My question is to the Treasurer. Housing is a critical need, but the industry and now the RBA is saying that record public non-energy infrastructure is putting pressure on inputs and wages, and home building is becoming uneconomic. With productivity in the sector stagnant, something's got to give. What is the government doing to slow non-essential infrastructure spending and allow capacity to return to the sector so we can get on with building homes?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Thank you to the member for Wentworth for her question. I know that she won't mind me also shouting out my friends from the BAPS community who are in the gallery today as well. I wear this Nada Charlie in your honour, as you know, and I wanted to shout out in particular my friend Jainesh, who's had a few health challenges in recent times, and it is so wonderful to see you here, my friend, to see you healthy. Lovely to see you on Saturday as well at India Day. I welcome you all. You are a reminder of the wonderful contribution that our faith communities make in the local areas that are represented here in the People's House. I say to the member for Wentworth, Mr Speaker, that I do acknowledge and I do understand the legitimate concerns that she raises about the pressure in the building industry, whether it's residential housing or large-scale infrastructure. And the government's view is that we need to build housing and infrastructure, not housing or infrastructure, and that one can enable the other, and we're focused on both. And here I want to shout out the great work of the Infrastructure Minister, the Housing Minister, old and new, for the work that we are trying to do to manage the pressures that the member for Wentworth legitimately raises. There's a number that really jumps out of the most recent CPI data, as the member would appreciate, and that is the 5.1% inflation when it comes to the construction sector. The construction sector is a big part of the CPI basket, and 5.1% is obviously too high, and this is the issue that the member for Wentworth is rightly identifying. I think there are three things that matter most when it comes to managing these pressures, but also attending to this productivity challenge that we've had in our economy for too long, something that the member for Wentworth has raised in other forums as well. The first thing is to manage the infrastructure pipeline in an intelligent way. The Infrastructure Minister manages that $120 billion pipeline in a way that makes sure that we can actually build what we are committed to building. The Minister's done a heap of good work in that regard. Some of that involves difficult decisions around reprofiling and retiming and resequencing different projects, but it's important work and we take it very seriously. The second thing is managing the skilled migration program in an intelligent way. Again, a big focus of this side of the House. And thirdly, and most importantly, I think it's about skills. You know, if you could fix one thing that would help us to build more infrastructure and more housing, not more infrastructure or more housing, you would train more Australian workers in this really important sector. Here I wanted to acknowledge not just the new Skills Minister, but also, after his wonderful valedictory yesterday, the outgoing Skills Minister, for the work that he's done in fee-free TAFE, working closely with the PM and others, because we do need more workers in this sector. And if we get more workers, if we train them better, they will be more productive and they will help us build the housing and the infrastructure that local communities right around Australia, including in your own community, desperately need.
Call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government's record investment in paid parental leave supporting Australian families? What approaches has the government rejected?
Give the call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Bennelong for his question and his tireless advocacy for families right across his community. Now, from our first day in government, the Albanese Labor government has been working hard to improve paid parental leave for working families. Because on this side of the House, we know that improving paid parental leave is a critical reform. We know paid parental leave is vital to the health and well-being of families, parents and children. Not only is it good for families, but it's also good for our economy too. One of the best ways to boost productivity and workforce participation is to provide more choice and more support for families and more opportunity for women. Now, each year, around 180,000 families across the country will benefit from our government's investment in paid parental leave, which totals a $2.3 billion investment across our three budgets. Now, of course, first we made paid parental leave more accessible, flexible, and we encouraged shared care. Then we passed legislation to expand the scheme to a full 6 months by 2026. But of course, we're not stopping there. Tomorrow I will introduce legislation to the House to pay superannuation on government-paid parental leave. Not only is our government providing immediate support to Australians with a new baby, but we're boosting their retirement savings. Now, our reforms on paid parental leave have been widely welcomed, including by the Parenthood, who said this is a significant improvement after no meaningful change to policy over the last decade. Now, Speaker, I have been asked about what approaches have been rejected. And of course, the approach that we have rejected has been the approach that those opposite took when they were in government. Now, the Leader of the Opposition was part of a cabinet over 2 successive terms in government attempted to cut $1 billion from paid parental leave and take that from the pockets of families. Their policy to cut paid parental leave went beyond, though, just bad policy. Those opposite showed their true attitude towards working women when they accused them of being double-dippers, fraudsters and rorters for just having the gall to access both their paid parental leave and their workplace entitlement. Their lack of understanding about the importance of paid parental leave for women's workforce participation still prevails. And in response to our improvements, we've seen Senator Patterson and Senator Hume characterise paid parental leave as welfare as opposed to a workplace entitlement. Those opposite have nothing positive to offer. Only Labor will get up and improve paid parental leave.
Has concluded. Give the call to the member for Groom.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, why is Australia handing out tourist visas to Gazans from the terrorist-controlled war zone in an average of 24 hours, and in some cases as quickly as 1 hour, while bypassing all the usual checks, including those the former coalition government used in Syria? Will the Prime Minister admit that the government's Visa for Vote scheme was only done to shore up votes in the seats of Watson, McMahon and Blackstone?
Yeah. Just, well, someone's on their feet, so I always give them the courtesy, so don't need to tell me who I'm calling or not Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Speaker, as you previously ruled, under Standing Order 100, there is a rule on imputations that doesn't apply elsewhere in debate. You ruled previously that when it was used in a question, that exact phrase was not appropriate. It's now being used deliberately in defiance of that ruling.
The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, the first point to make is that this was a question about the government's policy settings. There was no reference to any individual. This was a question about the government's policy settings, and the point of order, the standing order that the Leader of the House refers to is one that the government flouts on numerous occasions. Mr Speaker, there are regularly, yes. For example, the question asked of the Minister for Health after decades of cuts and neglect. So let's have a consistent approach. Let's have a consistent approach, Mr Speaker, to the questions asked by both sides.
Okay. I'm just going to deal with this in an orderly and respectful way. We don't need commentary from the sidelines. I'm just going to ask the member to state the question again, because I didn't hear the full question. I just want to make sure it's within standing orders, and within the question there are no reflections on any ministers or individuals. The member has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, why is Australia handing out tourist visas to Gazans from a terrorist-controlled war zone in an average of 24 hours, and in some cases as quickly as 1 hour, while bypassing all the usual checks, including those the former coalition government used in Syria? Will the Prime Minister admit the government's Visa for Vote scheme was only done to shore up votes in the seats of Watson, McMahon and Blaxland?
Yeah, order. Yeah, there's a collective invitation, but I'm just going to allow the Prime Minister to answer the question. Prime Minister has the call.
That logic, there were more people came from Syria under visitor visas from when they were in government, when ISIS was in charge of large amounts of Syria, than the 1,300 people who have come from the occupied Palestinian territories. And can I note this as well? There have been 5,491 visitor visas granted from Israel as well. And let me say this, those people are welcome here, we see what is going on here is so obvious, and the member for Toowoomba area, Groom, is certainly very conscious of it, which is why, you know, it's a shocker when no one on the front bench will ask it. Goes up the back, in order to sledge a whole group of people who live in Western Sydney. That's right. Well, I say this to those opposite. You can continue to sledge people in Western Sydney. What I'll continue to do as Prime Minister is represent the entire nation, including the good people of Western Sydney. They know that we take the same advice from the same security agencies as the previous government did. We've rejected more than 7,000 visa applications. They know as well. The member for Groom mightn't know because he just asked the question he was given, so I don't blame him, that the Rafah border crossing is controlled by the Israeli and Egyptian authorities, and it has been closed since May. But the member for Groom didn't come here anywhere in the Middle East. Well, people were coming in from the Middle East. The member for Groom, under the previous government, the member for Groom wasn't here, to be fair. Otherwise, maybe he would have been asking questions in Parliament about...
Order. Members on my left and right will cease. The Minister for Social Services will cease interjecting, so I can hear from the member for Wannon on a point of order.
This goes to relevance, Speaker. The question is, why is Australia handing out tourist visas to Gazans from a terrorist-controlled war zone in an average of 24 hours?
The Deputy Leader of the House on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, you didn't require the question to be reworded, but it was a wide-ranging sledge. Surely any answer that the Prime Minister gives is able to come within the contours of that sledge of a question.
So, order. Order. We'll deal with this. The question at the end was about shoring up boats, and a question around that type of nature, and particularly electorates, which the Prime Minister is referring to about Western Sydney, of course is being directly relevant. So just make sure, if he's talking about electorates, perhaps he can go into greater detail about the electorates. But if you're going to ask a question which has a political— yeah, I know the member for Groom. You're not in trouble. Order. Well, just for the member for Wannon, if you don't like the answer, I can appreciate that. It's not appropriate just to take a point of order if you don't like the answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
And I say this to the good people of Watson, Blaxland and McMahon, that we will respect every one of you, regardless of who you are, regardless of your faith, regardless of your ethnicity. We won't vilify you, we won't attack you, we won't undermine you, because we understand that strong people don't have to tell people how strong they are, bullies do.
Order. 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 Give a call to the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How is the Albanese Labor government's housing support program helping to make housing more affordable by getting more homes built more quickly in the right places?
Call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Can I thank the member for Hunter very much for that question, another great regional member over on this side of the House. We, of course, understand that people are under pressure and that some people are doing it tough. Our number one priority that is exercising us every day is delivering cost of living relief through tax cuts, energy bill relief and pay rises. And we know that one of the keys to addressing the cost of living is bringing down the cost of owning or renting a home, and that means building more houses and increasing supply. When I meet with councils and communities around the country, and I acknowledge the South East Queensland councils that I met with earlier today, when I meet with them around the country, one of the things that they tell me is a big barrier to getting more houses built is like getting local planning right and constructing the infrastructure needed to support new homes. It's why we have put $1.5 billion on the table to unlock the housing supply pipeline over the next 2 years. The Prime Minister recently announced $50 million to help local and state governments get local planning right, funding projects like a new strategy for Blacktown City Council to build more well-located housing around train stations, planning to build more homes around Bundaberg Hospital to ensure healthcare workers have affordable places to live close to where they work, funding to bring back a planning degree in South Australia to ensure that we actually have the workforce to actually give planning approvals, investing in the planning and servicing works needed to bring more housing online in 6 wheatbelt areas across Western Australia. And I know that bringing on new housing means getting the local planning right up front. That's because we know that good planning matters, from planning new homes and, of course, planning to submit your local council nomination forms on time. That's right. Just last Friday, the next round of the housing support program closed for applications. $450 million available to local, state and territory governments for that enabling infrastructure. We'll fund new investment to build the roads, connect the power, water and sewage to support residential construction. We'll also provide funding for community infrastructure like the parks and public spaces to support those new homes, because we don't want to just approve homes sitting on the books. We want sods turned on those homes right now, and that $450 million will make a significant difference. And of course, in the budget, we also provided $1 billion across states and territories to deliver new infrastructure to support housing supply and to deliver more social housing via the priority work streams. States and territories will submit their implementation plans to me by next month. We are committed to building more homes across this country, and we are committed to building the infrastructure to enable those new homes in our cities, our suburbs and our regions.
Put the call to the Leader of the Australian Greens.
Labor has approved 23 coal and gas projects and is giving $1.5 billion to the gas-expanding Middle Arm precinct. Will you work with the Greens to ensure a future made in Australia isn't a future for more coal and gas, but instead supports public ownership and a national critical minerals reserve so Australians get their fair share of the future? What's more important to you, Prime Minister, passing your bill or opening more coal and gas mines?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. And it's on a day when we have approved, through the Environment Minister, Australia's biggest renewable energy project ever. Ever. But does the Leader of the Greens talk about that? No, we won't worry about that. Does he talk about the fact that manufacturing jobs are also going to be created because of Australia's largest ever renewable energy project? No. Too busy out there preparing to vote once again with the coalition to block a future made in Australian legislation. Well, I'll say this about a future made in Australia. We have enormous opportunities that we can seize from the transition to net zero. And one of the things that people who are looking at large-scale renewable energy, such as Rio Tinto there in Gladstone, talk about is the need for firming capacity so that they can shift to net zero. And they see that gas has a role to play in that. Now, the Leader of the Australian Greens can pretend that that's not the case, deny that investment occurring, or he can actually get with the program of a real plan to deliver the transition to net zero in a way that sees us deliver the reduction that we have, 43% by 2030 and then net zero by 2050. Now, the Sun Cable project that was approved today in the Northern Territory is expected to deliver more than $20 billion in economic value to the Northern Territory, support an average of 6,800 direct and indirect jobs for each year of the construction phase, with a peak workforce of 14,300. 14,000 jobs in that area.
Order.
And he might know as well that Middle Arm has a role in that export. Middle Arm, by having an industrial precinct in the Northern Territory, has a role in the shift that is needed to occur and that is occurring. So I say to the member for Melbourne, he should support the Future Made in Australia plan. He should support Australian jobs. He should support Australian manufacturing, and we'll wait and see. But we're quite happy for him to get on board, and indeed for the coalition to get on board as well, making more things here, because we need a more resilient economy as we take advantage of the shift in the global economy.
Concluded. The call to the member for Blair.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. How is the Albanese Labor government working with industry to ensure the 3G switchover is conducted with public safety at the centre?
Give the call to the Minister for Communications.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question because he understands the importance of mobile connectivity, especially in the regions, and particularly when it comes to access to emergency services. Australians have always been early adopters, and the government supports all Australians having access to the very best services. Improvements in mobile coverage, capacity and speed only arrive through innovation, the efficient use of spectrum and the rollout of successive generations of mobile technologies. But from 2G to CDMA and now 3G, each of these network upgrades must be done in a safe way. The 3G switchover impacts devices in different ways. There are devices that rely solely on 3G, including 3G-only handsets, some EFTPOS machines and some personal and medical alarms. 3G-only handsets won't be able to make any calls after the switchover, and that will be apparent to end users. However, there's a subset of handsets which use 4G for voice and data, but are configured by the manufacturer to use 3G for calls to 000. Now, this category of handset is of concern because it won't be apparent to end users that they can't call 000, and they'd only discover this during an emergency when they're actually trying to make the call. So, following interrogation by my department earlier this year, industry figures showed that up to 740,000 devices in this category may be impacted. On receiving the advice as to this scale, I immediately stood up an industry working group overseen by my department. That enabled fortnightly updates on device numbers and progress on community and customer outreach efforts. The cooperation by the working group enables me now, Mr Speaker, to advise the House that the number of devices in this high-risk category has reduced from 740,000 to around 73,000. Now, that's a significant reduction, but both government and industry believe there is more to be done. To that end, the government welcomes the announcement by Telstra and Optus that they will delay their respective 3G network switchovers until the 28th of October. I also welcome them undertaking a joint public safety mass marketing campaign to raise consumer awareness, and I thank the CEO of Telstra, Vicky Brady, and the acting CEO of Optus, Michael Venter, for their constructive engagement with the government on these issues. It's also important for users of connected devices like medical monitors to check their compatibility by contacting their manufacturer or supplier, and I urge all customers to check if their mobile devices are impacted by simply texting the numeral 3 to the number 3498. Finally, options exist for the government to consider regulatory intervention, including potential proposals for future delays to the switchover if they're warranted and in the public interest, and any such actions will be subject to consultation and procedural processes.
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Questions are placed on the notice paper.